Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europarity Viva. I would like to discuss today the issue of sovereignty in Europe. It's quite a controversial topic. Sovereigntist movements all around the European Union are accused of being anti-European, and I'd like to discuss a bit this topic, what sovereignty is in the European context. So, many times when somebody criticizes something that Brussels does, the comeback line is always, well, we don't have sovereignty anymore because we are part of the European Union and therefore we cannot do anything about it. It's no longer our prerogative. Let's say, when the European Union makes a stupid decision in some aspect of life, like, of course, I can give tons of examples from past years. Let's say the green agenda, or the vaccine procurement program, or there are many things in the last 6-7 years. But actually, things don't work like this. So the fact that a country is a member of the European Union does not automatically imply that it no longer has sovereignty over any aspect of social life. So, of course, before countries entered the European Union, it was obvious that the government had full prerogatives over all aspects of life. There was nothing in the social sphere that the government could not regulate. And when the European Union was formed, and when subsequently different countries joined the European Union, it's not that they lost their sovereignty. This is a wrong way of understanding this thing. It's like they decided that upon some aspects of social life, they cede the prerogative to regulate to Brussels at the supranational level. So it's not that they're no longer sovereign in terms of, let's say, monetary policy. It's like they've given this aspect of sovereignty to a common body that regulates it in their benefit. So they're still sovereign. You cannot say that European countries are no longer sovereign over their currency aspects because they're in the Eurozone. No, they're still sovereign. They still have the sovereign prerogative to issue coin. This is one of the tenets of sovereignty, and European Union countries that are member of the Eurozone still have this prerogative. This prerogative stems from the people. This is how the nation states are built. And this prerogative was not rescinded. This prerogative was just given to a higher body to exercise it in their favor. So there was the theory of the optimal currency area, and as a consequence of this, it was decided that it's better for the economy of the bloc, for the economy of this supranational entity, to have a common currency in order to ensure price stability in member countries, to be less prone to speculative attacks, to have more weight in the international arena. Several things were considered, but the idea of the euro, of this common currency area, was still that it continues to be the sovereign prerogative of the nation states, but they exercise it in common, in their mutual benefit. So now at the European level, we have this discussion whether or not to withdraw the veto right of member states. And this would indeed be an infringement of sovereignty, in the sense that all decisions made by the European Union at the European level must be beneficial to all member states. If they're not beneficial to one state, this state is still a sovereign state and has the prerogative, and should continue to have the prerogative, to say no. It is true that many decisions taken at the federal level, it's not exactly a federal state, but we can call it that. Maybe this is the direction that things are going. So many decisions in the past years that were taken at the Brussels level were detrimental to, I would say, most member states. But this does not mean that these member states did not have sovereignty over those issues. So, for example, when the pandemic started and the European Union decided to do vaccine procurement together. So instead of each country buying its own vaccines, even though there were some countries buying their vaccines individually, like Hungary, but the majority of the countries opted for this mechanism in which they delegated the power to buy vaccines to Ursula von der Leyen, to the European Commission. It's not that they gave away their prerogative to, let's say, ensure public health on their territories. No, they just thought that it's better to obtain a better bargain by doing it collectively. What turned out was a fiasco. So various sovereign countries around the world, like China, like Russia, like Cuba, like I think even India, developed their own vaccines, and they developed them at cost, and they gave them for free to their citizens. So it was a matter of public health that was taken up as a national prerogative. The objective was to ensure the public health of the citizens, and therefore the respective sovereign states made a sovereign vaccine. They did not treat it as a product. They did not treat it as a source of profit. They treated it as just something to be given, just a medicine to be given to their populations so that they would not be sick. The approach at the European level was the opposite. It was treated as a profit-making instrument. And instead of the European Union developing its own vaccine, just like Russia did, just like all the sovereign countries that I named did, the European Union just approved the American vaccines. And not only did it approve them, but it also bought 10 times the number of doses than it had population. So for each European citizen, 10 doses would have been ascribed. And there were some backroom dealings, some shady connections between Ursula von der Leyen and the head of Pfizer. They were investigated up to a point, criminally investigated. Ursula von der Leyen deleted the SMSs on her phone in which she was negotiating with Albert Bourla, her friend. And in the end, we got this scam. It was a scam in the end. We had to pay huge amounts of money to the US pharmaceutical industry for some vaccines that, in my opinion, did not work. But it's not about this. It's not about whether or not they worked. It's about the fact that the Brussels establishment decided to do this scam in their own benefit. Probably there was some commissions involved, but the outcome was that they purchased a huge quantity, way more than it was required. And then they mandated, they incentivized, they advised member states to mandate them to their citizens, which member states gladly did, the majority of them. So they tried to make life impossible for those that were not up to date with the doses, so as to somehow legitimize the fact that 10 doses per capita were bought. This is, in my opinion, a horrible way to solve a public health emergency. And member states were captive to the decisions of the European Commission in this regard. So they could not, once they decided to go with this common procurement procedure, then they could no longer say no. They no longer had any control over the number of doses that were bought, and this is what happened. So instead of Europe using these sovereign prerogatives to act as a sovereign state, like these other sovereign states did, and to create its own vaccine at cost in order to ensure the public health of the European citizenry, the European Commission in this regard did exactly the opposite. It milked the public purse, it milked the taxpayers' money for a scam that was detrimental to the finances of the European Union member states, and that was detrimental to the public health of the European citizens, because those pharmaceutical companies from the United States did not have Europe's public health at heart. They just wanted to make a profit. And the European Commission made sure that these companies made huge profits. Now, ever since the pandemic, the European Commission created this network of, information disseminators in the member states. It's a network both of fact checkers and of content creators that issue favorable content towards all the decisions of the European Commission. And this network of propagandists made sure to stifle any kind of objections to this decision of the European Union to buy vaccines in this manner by calling any such criticism to be anti-vax, to be far right, to be Putinist. All the labels that dissident speech has nowadays in the European Union. So it was quite hard in those times to argue against people who are mesmerized by the European Commission and who worship Ursula von der Leyen and who worship Brussels to be this infallible thing, this infallible institution, greater than the Pope is in the Catholic Church. It was very hard to talk to these people to say that criticism is warranted regarding the purchasing procedure for the COVID vaccines, because they were like, "Oh, do you hate Europe? Do you hate democracy? Do you hate public health?" Everything is being built around this narrative of hate. Everybody who has a problem with how Brussels manages things is just this person that's full of hate and suspect to be far right and suspect to be a foreign agent. Just like in the times of the Soviet Union, in the times of Brezhnev, if you criticize the Brezhnev stagnation, then you had to be a puppet of the imperialists, right? You had to be paid by the Americans. There was no way to legitimately criticize the Soviet leadership. Everything that the Politburo, that the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union did was excellent, and if you had another opinion about this, then you are obviously a traitor to the motherland. This is the approach in Brussels nowadays. And I will not even get into the issue with Ukraine, because this got me into trouble, and 2 videos ago I explained more about that. But in principle, we as European citizens are still citizens of our nation states, and these nation states still have full prerogatives. They are still fully sovereign. They only outsourced some decisions to a collective body in which they are represented, and these decisions have to function to the benefit of everybody. Whenever the European Union propagandists say that countries can no longer object because they have no more sovereignty, that's a disingenuous remark, and it's actually a very dangerous remark. If that were true, then of course any country should take the decision to get its sovereignty back and to get out of the European Union. Luckily, this is not true. But if it were true that countries are no longer sovereign once they enter the European Union, that's an argument against the European Union. It's not an argument against the sovereignty of the nation states, because nation states derive their legitimacy from the people. This is what democracy means, whereas the European Union derives its legitimacy from some treaties in which even national parliaments were bypassed, not to mention the populations themselves, through referenda. Whenever those referenda were held, the results came out negative, and the referenda were ignored. But even the European Parliament, where members are directly elected in these pan-European elections, even the European Parliament is a decorative institution. It is a legislative body, one of the 2 legislative bodies of the European Union. But it cannot start legislation. It can only approve legislation. It does not make the European Union a democratic entity. because its most democratic body, the European Parliament, is more decorative than it has actual power to regulate. And this power is still at the nation-state level through the Council of the European Union. But now with these proposals to actually prohibit countries from opposing collective decisions, this is a mechanism in which countries are actually being stripped of sovereignty. So even the way I envisaged something like the federal states of Europe was not a way in which states had no more sovereignty. It was a way in which this sovereignty was exercised in common. The United States is a federal state, is a federal country. I do not perceive Americans from Alabama or from Mississippi or from Kentucky to have less sovereignty and to be second-class citizens just because their own states do not exercise their full prerogatives, their full state prerogatives, because there's this federal level on top of them that can regulate. No, it's the principle of subsidiarity. Some things can be better regulated at federal level, others at local level, others at country level or state level. But to deprive states of veto rights is the same as, I don't know, to have in the United States something like Puerto Rico. It's not a state. It is an occupied territory. It was occupied during the 1898 Spanish-American War. So the U.S. Just annexed it from Spain. It does not have voting rights. It does not have senators and congressmen. And therefore, it is just a territory without state rights. And Puerto Ricans are not fully American. They're not fully citizens because they do not have these prerogatives. They are being taxed without being represented. To reference this adage from the times of the American Revolutionary War. So the same would happen in Europe if we deprive voting rights from member states. If we say that certain member states do not have the power to oppose European Union decisions just because they would be against them. So basically, whatever is not favorable for the member states should be carried out anyhow, and the member states have no longer the possibility to object, then we would be in this situation in which the whole European Union project would be hijacked. So from that point onwards, we could say that a country like, I don't know, say Slovakia or Bulgaria, now that it elected this sovereigntist prime minister, if these countries were deprived of their veto power, it would be essentially like saying that they have no more sovereignty. In that sense, they would just become vassal territories of the European Union. And this is a real danger for countries at the periphery of the European Union, because through their accession process, they were somehow mandated by the European Union to sell off all sorts of state-owned companies and not to finance state-owned projects and not to finance their own infrastructure and so on and so forth, which made them an economic periphery of Western European capital. So, as a consequence of the expansion eastwards of the European Union, Western banks and Western corporations entered these markets and displaced any kind of local capital that was still there. So, retail chains, banks, many kind of corporations from Western Europe just took these countries over as new markets after local companies were basically forced to shut down as a prerequisite for European Union integration, because they did not meet the standards, whatever. The state was no longer allowed to support them, and finally this was the outcome. So energy companies, even water utilities, everything was bought up for cheap by Western European corporations. And the countries in Eastern Europe, which joined the European Union, became these peripheries for Western capital. But now, depriving them of their veto power and making them face any kind of decisions made at the European level that does not benefit them, would actually turn them into vassals, would turn them into colonies, would turn them into territories which do not have any way of advancing their own interest through the mechanism, this collective decision-making body that is the European Union. And this would go against, of course, the ideas, the principles, the reasons why these countries joined in the first place. So, for example, if we have countries from Eastern Europe that joined because they were poor and they wanted to be in the same club as the rich countries of Western Europe, they joined an economic union that was based on mutual prosperity, that had as its main driver the insurance of a high standard of living for their population. And this standard of living would flow also to the European Union countries and to their citizens. They did not join in order to turn this project into a project of war against Russia, for example. So the idea under which Eastern European countries joined in 2004 and in 2007 was this prosperity union. It was not to re-establish Operation Barbarossa. It was not to make the 22nd of June 1941 great again. Because this, of course, for the countries of Eastern Europe, means suicide, just like it meant in the Second World War. There is no way around it. Plus, this prosperity that was at the forefront of European Union objectives a few decades ago was also based on Russian hydrocarbons. It was based on Russian energy, and European Union elites struggled for decades to build this relationship, even though they were, after the Second World War, occupied by the Americans. They developed these ties under Willy Brandt, under several West German chancellors, of opening to the east and establishing these mutually beneficial trade relationships. And West Germany started buying Russian hydrocarbons in the time of the Soviet Union. So even though it was the Cold War was still raging, the Federal Republic of Germany, still under American occupation as it is today, was buying Russian gas. And throughout the 1990s, throughout the 2000s, these new pipelines were built, the Nord Stream pipelines. From the inauguration of Nord Stream, you have this photo with Mark Rutte, who was then the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, opening the valve for the Russian gas to come in. And it was deemed, he was side by side with Medvedev and with Angela Merkel. So it was deemed a very successful project for energy independence, for European energy independence, for the prosperity of the European citizens, for the efficiency of the European industry. And Eastern European countries did not sign up to the plan of deindustrializing the European Union and reindustrializing it as a weapons manufacturer. Because weapons are not capital goods. If you make weapons, the only way to make a profit on that process is either to sell them, but they're obviously being made for domestic reasons, or to conquer resources. So this is the only way you have return on investment, by making weapons. You conquer other people's resources, other people's territories, and therefore you can say you have a good return on investment. But otherwise, you just use them until they. You just hold them until they become obsolete, or you use them in war. And I would say that Eastern European countries did not sign up for this when they entered the European Union, and for sure they did not give up their sovereignty to this supranational decision-making body for the purpose of waging war against Europe's main energy supplier at the behest of the United States. So I would like to see if the sovereignties movement in Europe is a national one, and it is mainly funneled by American and Israeli interests to divide and conquer the European Union. I can accept this argument, but I would like to see some European sovereigntists, some pan-European sovereigntist movements that would like us to decouple from the United States, from the interests of the United States, because in its current form, the European Union is just a vassal state of the US, and it is just making decisions that are detrimental to itself and to its own citizens, and they are favorable to the United States. The best example and the most visual one is the trade agreement that Ursula von der Leyen agreed to this year on the golf course of Donald Trump in Scotland. So the head of the European Commission traveled to an area outside the European Union, to Scotland, to the private golf course of Donald Trump, the American president, and there she went to sign the capitulation agreements. She went to sign an agreement to accept 15%, I think it was 15% tariff on all European Union exports to the American market, and at the same time to allow all American products to enter the European market duty-free. So am I anti-European if I denounce this agreement, if I say that this agreement is detrimental to us Europeans? Of course, this argument with being anti-European functions well at the edges of the European Union, at the periphery, where countries are maybe closer to Asia or Africa, and they might be I don't know, they might be persuaded by this argument that they should follow Europe in whatever decision it makes, because otherwise they are Asian or whatever. If there are certain countries that have this anxiety not to be Asian or not to be African, then of course this argument of, oh, you must follow Europe can stick. But otherwise, let's say to us Western Europeans, because I live in Western Europe and I'm also a citizen of a Western European country, to us Western Europeans, what argument can be brought forth to justify this kind of vassalage, this kind of tutelage by the United States, and this kind of subservience to US interests, and to stifle any kind of critique as being anti-European? It's anti-European because it's what? It's pro-African, it's pro-Asian? I don't know. So this is what I wanted to talk to you today about. When you hear somebody saying that we as European citizens have no more sovereignty because it was given to Brussels, don't listen to them. It's actually wrong. The collective decision-making bodies in Brussels are there because we mandate them to, and we can take back any prerogative that is shared. For example, even currency issuance. If a country wants to withdraw from the Eurozone, it has not lost its privilege of minting its own coin. Of course, there are costs to it. It's a complex manner. But still, every member state has this prerogative still, because it has not been turned into a vassal country. Only vassal provinces of empires did not have the prerogative to issue their own currency or to conduct their own foreign affairs. This is not what we are. We as member states of the European Union have just delegated these prerogatives that we still hold, but the exercise of these prerogatives were delegated to these collective decision-making bodies. This is all there is to it. So we are still sovereign nations, and Europe is still a Europe of sovereign nations. No hint intended to the European Parliament group called this way. So this is what I wanted to tell you, and if you want to support me, like, share, subscribe. You'll find a link in the description how to support my channel, in the description of the channel. And until next time, take care.